I was 24 when my dad raised his glass at my stepbrother's birthday party and toasted, "To Nathan, the son I always hoped for." The words didn't sting right away, maybe because I was too stunned to react, or maybe because I was already used to being invisible in my own family. But later that night, as I sat alone in my tiny apartment, cradling the cheap, world's okayest son mug I'd been handed earlier that day, it hit me like a freight train. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being replaced. My name's Aaron, and for the last 5 years, I've been the one keeping my father's business from falling apart. While most guys my age were still figuring out their careers, I was in the office at 6 a.m. every morning, managing payroll, reworking contracts, smoothing over client relationships my dad had nearly torched, and making sure vendors didn't walk out on us. I gave up a social life. I gave up college. I gave up my sanity some days. But I did it all because I genuinely thought, that someday, maybe he'd look at me the way he looked at Nathan. Nathan's not even blood. He's my stepbrother from my dad's second marriage to Sandra, who breezed into our lives when I was 16 and brought her then 15-year-old son with her. Back then, Nathan was loud, obnoxious, and allergic to responsibility. He'd strut around in designer sneakers he didn't pay for, blowing through every allowance he was given, and somehow still managed to convince everyone he was the victim when things didn't go his way. Sandra enabled him like it was a full-time job. "He's just creative," she'd say, as he skipped school for the 4th time that week. "He's got a unique spirit," she'd smile, after he crashed the family car and blamed it on the brakes. Dad used to be sharper, harsher even. When I was younger, he'd give me that steely glare if I didn't fold the laundry right. He'd lecture me for hours about the value of hard work and discipline. But ever since Sandra came along, something shifted. It was like he finally had the perfect family in his head, the picturesque wife, the charming son, and I was the leftover piece that didn't fit the puzzle. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I was being dramatic. But the signs were always there, simmering just beneath the surface. It started small. Nathan accidentally erased important files from our accounting software when he tried to help at the office. I got blamed for not backing them up. Then he started tagging along to meetings, interrupting me mid-sentence to pitch ridiculous ideas he found on YouTube, like turning our logistics company into a blockchain-powered eco-shipping NFT brand. Clients were confused. I was humiliated. But Dad laughed and said he was glad someone was thinking outside the box. I gritted my teeth and fixed everything behind the scenes. Then there was the time Nathan asked to borrow $5,000 to invest in some app his friend was building. I said no. He went to Dad, who pulled me into his office and asked why I was being selfish. That same week, I found out the money had come from the company account, a move Dad made without telling me, after years of insisting I run every minor expense by him. When I questioned him, he shrugged. "It's a small risk," he said. "Nathan's got potential." But the real turning point, the moment that scraped away whatever scraps of denial I had left, was that birthday party. Nathan was turning 25, and Sandra wanted to go all out. "It's a milestone," she said. "Let's show him how much we love him." She rented out this high-end sushi restaurant downtown, the kind with velvet booths, imported fish flown in that morning, and a cocktail menu longer than most novels. The guest list was a who's who of people Nathan barely knew but wanted to impress. Influencers, entrepreneurs, old classmates he used to bully, and, of course, a handful of our company's most valuable clients, ones I had spent years building relationships with. I wasn't really asked to come. I was expected. When I arrived, no one even greeted me. Nathan was already 3 drinks in, laughing too loud, taking selfies with his new girlfriend, a model, apparently, though I don't think she blinked once during the entire evening. Sandra beamed like it was her own coronation. And Dad, he was in rare form, smiling, shaking hands, doing that thing where he slapped backs a little too hard to seem friendly. Then came the speech. They dimmed the lights. Someone rang a glass. Nathan stood on a chair like a man-child, arms outstretched, basking in the attention. "Before I say anything," he said, already slurring, "I just want to thank my parents. Seriously, you guys went above and beyond." Sandra clutched her chest like she was about to cry. Dad looked around the room, raised his glass, and said, with a laugh, like it was the funniest joke in the world, "To Nathan, the son I always hoped for." Everyone laughed. Except me. I just sat there, frozen, staring down at the crumpled gift bag someone had handed me earlier. Inside was a mug. A novelty mug with a crooked print that read, "Be grateful." No card. No wrapping paper. Just the mug. I didn't even know who it was from. After the speech, I stepped outside to get some air. I leaned against the brick wall, letting the cold sink in. My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder for payroll next week. I thought about the spreadsheets I had spent hours fixing, the emails I had sent from bed, the meetings I'd rescheduled to accommodate Dad's golf outings. I thought about the sleepless nights, the stomach ulcers, the time I spent away from people I loved just to keep the damn company alive. And for what? For a $5 mug and a reminder to be grateful. That night, I went home, packed a bag, and left a note on my desk. I won't be coming in tomorrow. Or ever again. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't even slam the door. I just left. What happened next? Well, that's when things got interesting. I didn't expect a thank you. I didn't even expect a phone call. But what I did expect, at the very least, was some kind of reaction when I walked away from the company I had practically hand-built from the ground up. I gave my 20s to that place. I sacrificed relationships, turned down better-paying offers, and lived in a dingy apartment just to funnel more of my time and energy into the business. Into his business. Into our family legacy. Or so I thought. But days passed. Then a week. Then two. And nothing. Not a single call. Not a text. No emails. Nothing from Dad. Nothing from Sandra. And definitely nothing from Nathan, who I figured was too busy cruising around in his new graphite gray sports car. A car I recognized immediately when I saw it posted on his Instagram, parked outside some rooftop lounge, complete with a caption that read, "Manifestation looks good on me." I had to laugh. Bitterly. It was surreal, watching from the sidelines as the company's social media account continued posting as if I hadn't just ghosted the entire operation. The captions were suddenly all fluff, no substance. Copy-paste buzzwords. Hollow motivational quotes slapped on top of stock images. I recognized the desperate tone because I'd seen it before, back when we were clawing our way out of debt and trying to keep up appearances. Back then, Dad was humble, hungry, and he listened. Now, it was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. But I didn't look away. I moved in with my college friend Luke in a small 2-bedroom downtown. Nothing fancy, creaky floors, mismatched furniture, but it had something my last place never did: peace. I started freelancing, mostly consulting for small startups and helping them structure their logistics. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And for the first time in years, I woke up without knots in my stomach. But even peace doesn't fully shield you from betrayal. About 3 weeks after I left, I got a call from Renee, our longest-running client. She owned a boutique packaging firm that we'd partnered with for years. I had onboarded her myself, smoothed over early delivery issues, and even helped her revamp her back-end system. We'd shared drinks after long negotiations. I knew her kids' names, so when her name flashed on my screen, I picked up instantly. "Aaron," she said, her voice tight. "Hey, Renee. Good to hear from you. What's up?" Silence. Then, "Why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" I blinked. I figured it wasn't really public info. But yeah, I stepped away. Needed a change. "I found out through Nathan," she said, with a sharpness I wasn't used to hearing from her. "He said you abandoned the company, that you couldn't handle the pressure." I sat down slowly. "He what?" "He tried to renegotiate our contract," she continued, her voice rising. "Wanted to increase our fees by 30% and cut our delivery priority. When I pushed back, he said, and I quote, 'Well, Aaron's not around to play favorites anymore.'" I felt my jaw tighten. "I know," she said quickly. "I know. I just needed to hear it from you. Because the way he's been talking, you'd think you were dead weight." That was the moment I realized just how deep Nathan's claws had sunk in. It wasn't just that I was gone. He was rewriting the narrative, turning my absence into an opportunity to consolidate power, to spin stories, to bury every contribution I'd ever made beneath a layer of smug, influencer-grade BS. And Dad was letting him. Or worse, helping him. I asked Renee if she planned to stay on. She hesitated, then said, "For now, but I'm watching closely. And if you ever start something new, let me know." That meant more than I could say, but it also lit a fire under me, a rage I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. I wasn't angry just because I was lied about. I was angry because deep down, I knew this was the plan all along. Nathan had been worming his way in for months, pitching half-baked ideas, calling himself head of innovation on his LinkedIn, and showing up to investor calls without invitation. I used to think he was just trying to impress Dad, but now I saw it clearly. He had been laying the groundwork to push me out, and I had walked right into it. The final straw came a few days later when I got a message from one of our junior accountants, Melissa. Sweet kid, fresh out of college, bright and careful, and always asking smart questions. She DM'd me on LinkedIn, of all places. Hey Aaron, sorry to bother you. I know you're not with the company anymore, but I thought you should know. Your name was removed from all internal files, including the company founders page. They replaced you with Nathan as co-founder. My heart dropped. I clicked through to the website, and there it was. The Our Story page, which used to have a photo of Dad and me shaking hands at the launch event back in 2016, now featured a sleek black and white shot of Nathan leaning against a conference table like some kind of tech bro visionary. The caption read, Nathan Taylor, co-founder and chief strategy officer. With a passion for disruptive innovation and a relentless entrepreneurial spirit, Nathan has helped shape the company's evolution into a next-gen logistics powerhouse. No mention of me. No mention of my 5 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice. I'd been erased, like I never existed. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I clicked over to Dad's bio. It had been updated too. Inspired by his son Nathan's bold thinking, Robert Taylor reimagined the company's future, ushering in a new era of growth and vision. I wasn't even mad at Nathan anymore. I was mad at Dad. He didn't just let this happen. He endorsed it. He signed off on it. He let a boy who had never worked a real day in his life take credit for everything I built. And the worst part? I think he liked doing it. I think it made him feel like a hero, the wise old patriarch passing the torch to his prodigy son, pretending the awkward, quiet kid who saved his company from bankruptcy was never really part of the plan. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the kitchen, staring at the mug. Be grateful. The next morning, I turned off all distractions and opened an old spreadsheet I hadn't touched in months. It was something I'd started back when I first began noticing errors in our systems. Invoices that didn't match, client records that were mysteriously missing hours, supplier payments marked as void without explanation. At the time, I chalked it up to growing pains. But now, I wondered. I started cross-referencing. Transaction IDs, internal memos, old emails, and it didn't take long to find it. Sloppy paper trails, duplicate invoices, consulting fees paid out to shell companies. And one name kept popping up, tied to every shady entry. Taylor Strategic Solutions, an LLC that, according to state records, was registered in Nathan's name 6 months ago. He was bleeding the company, and either Dad didn't know, or he didn't care. I took a deep breath and kept digging. Every discovery felt like a punch to the gut. I found vendor contracts being rerouted, kickbacks disguised as influencer partnerships, and most galling of all, a full marketing budget allocated to a podcast Nathan had launched, where he spent 30-minute episodes monologuing about hustle culture and disruption, without ever once mentioning the product the company actually sold. It wasn't just incompetence. It was theft, and it was personal. This wasn't about proving myself anymore. This was about taking back what was mine. Not the company, not the title, but my dignity, my story, my name. Because if they thought they could erase me, they had no idea what I was about to do next. I didn't go to war with them right away. It would have been easy, emotionally satisfying, even, to fire off an email blast exposing Nathan's shell company or publicly call out Dad's betrayal. But something in me resisted the urge. Maybe it was pride, maybe exhaustion, or maybe it was the quiet voice in the back of my mind whispering, let them fall first. Because they would. The company had no legs without me. I was the one who had built its systems, maintained relationships, streamlined operations, handled compliance, audits, and vendor escalations. Nathan thought it was about branding and buzzwords. Dad had started believing that too. But I knew the gears behind the curtain, and I knew how quickly things could unravel without the right hands on the controls. So I watched, and I waited. Meanwhile, I started to rebuild. At first, it was just out of necessity. Rent wasn't going to pay itself, and while consulting kept me afloat, it wasn't consistent. I reached out to old contacts. Renee introduced me to a friend of hers in Denver who needed help launching a regional fulfillment branch. That turned into a 2-month contract, one that paid decently, and gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: autonomy. I wasn't waking up to 40 unread messages. I wasn't chasing overdue invoices. I wasn't being talked over in boardrooms by a guy who still thought net profit meant you caught a fish in a money net. I was just doing work I liked, solving problems, thinking clearly. And slowly, something shifted. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since college. Nothing big, just notes, observations. The way certain supply chains failed because the people running them never worked the floors. The gap between leadership and labor. How companies prioritized image over infrastructure. Luke noticed. "You've got a voice for this," he said one night over takeout. "You should publish some of these." I shrugged. Who'd want to read that kind of stuff? He grinned. People who don't want their companies to implode. So I tried. I turned one of my longer rants into a LinkedIn article. The invisible hands that actually hold companies together. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a few likes from old coworkers. But within a week, it had 20,000 views. CEOs were commenting. Founders were messaging. I got invited to speak on a podcast hosted by a small business think tank. It wasn't fame, but it was something I hadn't felt in years: respect. And then the offers started coming. Advisory gigs. Short-term turnarounds. A startup in Chicago wanted me to design their back-end logistics. A sustainability brand in Austin flew me out to consult on integrating ethical sourcing practices into their warehouse model. I wasn't rich, not yet. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt free. Still, I couldn't shake the bitterness. Every win felt hollow, like I was trying to prove something to people who weren't watching. Every time I hit a new milestone, I'd wonder if Dad had noticed. If Sandra was still chirping about how Nathan has such a modern approach. If Nathan even understood what he'd taken from me. But they weren't watching, because they were too busy drowning. The first crack appeared when I got a call from Melissa again. This time, she sounded panicked. "Aaron," she whispered, "I think we're in trouble." "What happened?" "Payroll bounced. Twice." I sat up straight. "What do you mean, bounced?" "I mean, half of us didn't get paid. And no one's answering questions. Nathan hasn't been in the office all week. Sandra's been calling everyone negative if they ask too many questions." "And your dad?" "He's weirdly quiet." That didn't surprise me. Dad always disappeared when things went south. "What about the CFO?" "She quit 2 weeks ago. Replaced by some guy Nathan met at a crypto meetup." I nearly choked. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." I thanked her and hung up. Then I checked the company's site again. Still flashy. Still polished. But the job listings were gone. The client logos at the bottom were fewer. And the Contact Us page now redirected to a generic form with a warning that response times might be delayed due to restructuring. I knew what that meant. So I waited one more week. Then came the email. Not to me, of course. To the public. A carefully worded press release announcing that the company was pivoting its business model to focus on digital branding and community development, which, translated from startup speak, meant we have no money and no clue what we're doing. Within 48 hours, I got 3 messages from former clients. One was livid. One was confused. One just said, "Now I understand why you left." But none of that compared to what I got next. A call. From my father. I stared at the screen for a full minute before answering. When I did, I didn't say anything. I just let him speak first. "Aaron," he said, and his voice already sounded different. Smaller. "I know it's been a while." I didn't respond. "I wanted to check in," he continued. "See how you're doing." "Why?" I said finally. He hesitated. "Just, I miss you." "Do you?" I said calmly. "Or do you miss not having someone around to fix everything?" Silence. Then, "Nathan's been struggling. He's trying his best, but..." "Save it," I snapped. I saw the contracts. I know about Taylor Strategic Solutions. A beat. "How?" "You left a digital paper trail." "He's an amateur." My father exhaled shakily. "It's been a rough few weeks. We've had some miscalculations." "Miscalculations," I repeated. "You mean embezzlement? Fraud? Or just handing the wheel to someone who's never driven?" "I made mistakes," he said, and I could tell it cost him to admit that. "I let things get out of hand." "No," I said. "You pushed them out of hand. You erased me. You watched Nathan take credit for my work, and you cheered him on." "Aaron," he said quietly, "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought he had vision. And I guess I was just the placeholder." I said, the anger finally seeping into my voice. "The warm-up act before your real son showed up." There was a long silence. Then, almost brokenly, "I didn't mean for it to go this way." "Yeah," I said. "Well, it did." That was the end of the call, but not the end of the fallout. Because once the truth about the shell company got out, and it did, fast, everything started unraveling. Vendors pulled out. Investors threatened legal action. And the employees who hadn't already jumped ship began doing so in droves. Within a month, the company that I had once called my life was gone. Bankrupt. Closed. Website offline. And suddenly, everyone was watching me. Not with scorn, but with hope. Because even as my old life crumbled behind me, my new one was just beginning. Quietly, confidently, I started laying the foundation for something better. Something of my own. After everything collapsed, I expected silence. A vacuum. The kind that swallows people after they've been betrayed, humiliated, and tossed aside like a broken tool. But instead, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Former clients, ex-employees, investors who had once treated me like the quiet one in the background. They were all calling, texting, messaging, some to offer sympathy, others to apologize, and more than a few to ask, "Are you starting something new?" At first, I didn't know how to answer that. My entire adult identity had been wrapped around my dad's company. 4 or 5 years, every business decision, every late night, every sacrifice had fed into his dream, his legacy. Even after walking away, part of me felt like an orphan, cut off from a family I never fully belonged to. But another part of me, the smarter, colder part, felt something else rising. Not grief. Precision. If I was going to rebuild, it wasn't going to be reactionary. It wasn't going to be me scrambling to prove my worth again. This time, I was going to move deliberately, not just to succeed, but to make sure my name was never forgotten again. Not by the industry, and certainly not by my family. So I got to work. The first step was information. I didn't want revenge built on guesswork or emotion. I needed facts. And luckily, years of running the back end had taught me exactly where to look. See, even before I left the company, I had started logging irregularities. Not just the financial stuff, but conversations, behaviors, emails. It started as a habit, just a way to keep myself sane in a gaslighting environment. But now, it was a blueprint. Every invoice Nathan forged, every NDA Sandra violated by gossiping about client accounts at charity galas, every time Dad signed off on something questionable, thinking no one was paying attention. I backed it all up. Names, dates, signatures, voice memos, even internal Slack messages Melissa had quietly forwarded before quitting. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it all yet, but I knew one thing. When the time came, they weren't just going to lose money. They were going to lose everything. But I wasn't rushing. The smarter play was to rebuild first. So I took one of those investor calls, a woman named Claudia Liu. Sharp, blunt, scary intelligent. She had previously backed us during our second growth stage, and I always suspected she had liked me more than she liked the company itself. "You're wasted working under men like that," she told me. "What's your plan?" I told her the truth. I didn't want another logistics company. I wanted something smarter, more adaptive, less bloated. A hybrid consultancy that focused on rescue operations, helping small to mid-sized businesses on the brink of collapse to rebuild their supply and fulfillment models fast, efficiently, and ethically. A SWAT team for logistics, basically. I figured she'd say, "Interesting, maybe when you're more established." Instead, she said, "Send me a deck. You'll have seed capital in a week." And just like that, I had a shot. I called the new company Fulcrum. It was more than a name. It was a mission. A fulcrum is the point that makes leverage possible. The center of balance. The invisible piece that moves everything else. It was what I had been for my father, unnoticed, underappreciated, but critical. Now, I was building a team of fulcrums. I didn't advertise publicly. I didn't post flashy hiring announcements or throw up Instagram reels of startup life. I worked quietly, assembling people I trusted, not just talented, but loyal. People who had been stepped on, overlooked, underestimated. Renee came on board as our first client, and also a silent partner. Melissa left her temporary job at another firm to become our financial lead. I hired Luke to run ops, and within 2 months, we had an airtight system. Fulcrum's first success was spectacular. A regional furniture supplier, one of our old rivals, was about to lose their biggest contract due to warehouse delays and misrouted shipments. We rebuilt their distribution model in 21 days. They stayed in business. I made sure our name was in every article about it. The industry started to whisper. And then came the perfect opportunity. One of my old clients, Samir, a high-volume home goods importer, reached out. He'd just received a proposal from a company called Taylor Strategic Solutions, the same shell company Nathan had used to skim funds from my dad's business. Apparently, now that the main company had collapsed, Nathan was trying to turn the shell into a real brand, offering streamlined branding and international fulfillment solutions, according to their new website, which featured stock images of smiling people in headsets and warehouses I knew for a fact didn't exist. Samir wasn't impressed. I looked at their materials, he said, and I thought, this feels like a high schooler's pitch. I laughed. That's because it is. He paused. Wait, is this your Nathan? Unfortunately. So should I run? Run fast, I said, and tell me if he contacts anyone else you know. From there, the pieces started falling into place. Nathan was desperate. He had burned every bridge, lost all credibility, and was now trying to rebuild a brand off borrowed words and stolen graphics. But more importantly, he was still using the Taylor name, still trying to ride on the illusion of a legacy he helped destroy. That's when the idea started to crystallize. I wasn't going to destroy him by exposing him publicly. No, I was going to strip him of his name. I contacted an old legal acquaintance, Tara, an IP specialist, and laid everything out. Every misused company trademark, every shady rebrand, every stolen photo, fake warehouse claim, and false endorsement quote on their site. You have a case, she said, eyes gleaming. Multiple, actually. And if we move fast, we can file cease and desist before they even get their first client. But I didn't want to just shut him down. I wanted him to see my face when it happened. So I waited for the right moment. It came when Sandra, the queen herself, decided to host a fundraiser gala for some nonsense charity she sat on the board for. It was her way of pretending their family still had prestige. The kind of event where people wore designer sunglasses inside. Claudia, my investor, got me an invitation. Apparently, she had been on the mailing list for years. You'll want to see this one, she said. Trust me. The night of the event, I arrived alone. Black suit. No tie. Calm. Nathan was already there, working the room. I could see him laughing too loud, gesturing like a man with no actual stories to tell. Dad stood nearby, clearly tired, clearly older. And Sandra, Sandra, was glowing like she'd just won an Oscar. I didn't say anything at first. I let them see me. Let Nathan's face freeze. Let Sandra's smile twitch. Let Dad's eyes go wide. Then I walked straight past them and joined Claudia at a VIP table near the stage. The program began. Speeches. Applause. Pledges. Then, halfway through, they announced the featured sponsor for the evening. Taylor Strategic Solutions. Nathan stood up to mild, confused clapping. He walked up to the stage, started thanking the crowd, blathering about entrepreneurship and rebuilding. When I leaned toward Claudia, she handed me a small envelope. Inside were the legal notices, cease and desist orders, trademark violation filings, and the full audit Tara had compiled. I stood up, walked quietly to the side of the stage, and handed them to him. He froze mid-sentence. Read the top page. And I watched his face crack. He stammered, tried to keep speaking, but the room shifted. People murmured. Sandra stood up, hissing something under her breath. Dad just sat there, frozen. I turned, walked out the way I came. Didn't say a word. I didn't need to, because now, the real fallout would begin, and I was just getting started. It's amazing how fast people scatter when the illusion of power vanishes. After the gala, Nathan didn't just lose a few leads, he lost everything. Tara filed the legal injunctions the very next morning. Taylor Strategic Solutions had 7 days to cease operations, remove all references to the Taylor name, and account for every dime made under false branding. There weren't many dimes. Turns out, the few deals Nathan had secured were either lukewarm handshakes from people who didn't bother checking credentials or shady side hustles that would have imploded with a stiff breeze. Sandra tried to put on her usual, "this is just noise" front, posting inspirational quotes on her Instagram like, "setbacks are setups for comebacks, and the haters don't know your grind." But behind the scenes, her calls were going straight to voicemail, her board positions were reevaluated, and her name was being quietly scrubbed from donor pages she once bragged about over Chardonnay. As for Dad, he went quiet. No press release. No social media statement. No attempt to defend Nathan. That silence, more than anything, told me exactly what I needed to know. I wasn't just watching a family unravel. I was watching the collapse of a fantasy. Because that's what it had always been, hadn't it? The perfect second family. The golden son. The redemption arc of a man who got a second chance at happiness. Except it was all propped up on the shoulders of someone they refused to see. Me. And now they were free-falling without me. Still, I wasn't done. Because revenge isn't always about public humiliation. Sometimes, the most devastating justice happens quietly. In rooms where the ones who betrayed you realize they've burned their last bridge, and the only person who could have saved them is no longer taking their calls. And trust me, the calls came. It started with a voicemail. "Hey, Aaron. It's Dad. I was hoping we could talk. I think I owe you more than an apology." I deleted it. A week later, another. "I know I messed up. I was blind, I see that now. Sandra's been. Well, let's just say things aren't how I thought they were. Nathan's blaming everyone. I don't know what to do." I didn't respond. Then came the email. A long one. From a burner address. Like he was afraid I'd block his main. In it, he confessed to everything. Said he knew I'd been the one holding things together. That he was ashamed. That he had let pride and Sandra get in the way of seeing what was right in front of him. He told me he was selling the last of the business assets. That he was thinking of moving away. Starting fresh somewhere small. "I'm sorry for erasing you," he wrote. "But I've never stopped being proud of you. I just didn't know how to show it." I almost replied. I sat there for a long time. Fingers hovering over the keys, heart pounding. But I didn't. Because he hadn't just erased me from the website. He'd erased me from his life. Over and over again. At birthdays. In boardrooms. In the way he lit up when Nathan stumbled through a half-coherent idea, but barely nodded when I presented 5-year projections that saved the company's future. Sorry wasn't enough. But I still had one more move. A few weeks after Fulcrum closed a huge new contract. One that doubled our operating budget. I hosted a small private dinner for our early partners. Claudia, Melissa, Renee, a few others who had stuck by me when things were uncertain. It wasn't fancy, just good food, good conversation, and a brief moment to breathe. At the end of the night, I stood up, glass in hand. 5 years ago, I said, I was helping run a company where my name wasn't on the door, and apparently, neither was my value. I was told to be grateful for scraps while someone else got paraded around as the future. I left quietly, with no plan. But I walked away with one thing that mattered. Everyone leaned in. My dignity. I raised the glass. And now, I have something better. People who see me. A team that moves like a machine. And a business built on truth, not fantasy. They clapped, cheered, toasted. But I wasn't finished yet. After the dinner, I slipped away to a quiet corner of the rooftop. The city buzzed beneath us, golden and alive. I pulled out my phone, opened LinkedIn, and updated my profile headline. Founder and CEO, Fulcrum Systems. We don't chase legacy. We build it. Then I opened Nathan's profile. Still listed himself as CEO of a global innovation firm. Still using buzzwords like visionary and disruptive thinker. Still pretending like nothing had happened. So I sent him a message. Just 3 words. You earned this. He saw it. Left me on read. Perfect. The final move came a month later, when I bought the office space 2 blocks away from where our old company used to be. A sleek corner unit with glass walls and a street-facing sign. Fulcrum Systems. I didn't need to rub it in anyone's face. They already knew. Sandra had been spotted at a country club trying to pitch her new wellness brand. Nathan had gone radio silent. And my father? According to a former neighbor, he'd moved out of the city entirely. No forwarding address. No goodbye. It didn't matter. Because I had already made peace with the fact that I'd never get the apology I deserved. Not really. But I got something better. I got my life back. And I built something no one could take away from me ever again. For years, I tried to earn their love. Now, they're the ones who have to live with the weight of losing mine. And I sleep just fine.